Welcome to the USDA National Organic Programs webinar, Accessing the EU Organic Market, with Miles McAvoy, Deputy Administrator of the USDA National Organic Program, presenting. Please note that the first 18 slides do not include an audio component. Deputy Administrator McAvoy's presentation begins on slide 19 after approximately 9 minutes. Welcome to the USDA National Organic Programs webinar, Accessing the EU Organic Market, with Miles McAvoy, Deputy Administrator of the USDA National Organic Program, presenting. Please note that the first 18 slides do not include an audio component. Deputy Administrator McAvoy's presentation begins on slide 19 after approximately 9 minutes. Welcome to the USDA National Organic Programs webinar, Accessing the EU Organic Market, with Miles McAvoy, Deputy Administrator of the USDA National Organic Program, presenting. Please note that the first 18 slides do not include an audio component. Deputy Administrator McAvoy's presentation begins on slide 19 after approximately 9 minutes.
In terms of the U.S. assessment team's findings, we found that they have a very thorough and comprehensive oversight over certifying agents. It's a very different structure than we have here, but once we understood how they do that through the member countries and the member countries overseeing the certifiers, we have a lot of confidence in their system. They do have very effective and timely enforcement. In fact, we wish we had some of those enforcement capacities that they have. They have stop sale authority, for instance. That would be nice to have. They have a similar use and approval of inputs. We have a lot of questions about the way that they approve inputs, but it's actually a fairly similar system. They do have organizations similar to OMRI that evaluate brand name products and approve brand name products for certifiers to utilize, or for producers and handlers to utilize. They have very rigorous inspections and a certification process. They do a lot of residue testing. And then we also found that they have a similar size and scale of organic operations in the EU that we have in the U.S., all from small scale to large scale. Moving on to some of the details of the arrangement, the way that it works on the U.S. side is that, or on the EU side, is that the U.S. is added to the EU Commission. The EU's Commission's list of equivalent third countries. We're actually the 11th country that's added to the EU list of equivalent third countries. And then on the U.S. side, what we do under 7 CFR 205-500C is we've determined that the EU Commission has an equivalent system. So we issued that letter last week that documents that we've determined that they have an equivalent system. And this arrangement is effective on June 1st of 2012. So the requirements on the EU side to get products into the EU, no antibiotics can be used in organic apple and pear production. The requirement for import certificates is retained. That's a current requirement under the EU system for any organic product coming in from a third country, so that requirement is still there. And then you need to comply with the EU organic labeling requirements. On the U.S. side, for getting products into the U.S. market, no antibiotics can be used in organic livestock production. There'll be a requirement for import certificates. The details about the import certificates will be coming out in the next couple of months. And this will be EU authorized certifiers will be able to issue import certificates for products coming into the U.S. that meet the terms of the arrangement. And then again, compliance with the U.S. organic labeling requirements is part of the requirements under the arrangement. So a little more detail there. In terms of no antibiotics in organic apple and pear production, this is an EU import requirement. Any organic apples and pears that are grown with the use of antibiotics under the USDA organic regulations, which include streptomycin or tetracycline, they do not meet the terms of the arrangement. And so apples and pears or apple and pear ingredients in a processed organic product that are produced with antibiotics are not in compliance with this arrangement. However, U.S. organic apples and pears that are grown without antibiotics may be traded under the arrangement. And I know that in the Northwest that there's already systems in place to segregate and identify apples and pears that are produced with organic apples and pears that are produced with antibiotics and those that are not for access to the European market, making that segregation. And on the EU side, if they want to ship organic livestock products to the U.S., it's a import requirement that no antibiotics are used in organic livestock production. Organic animals, including both slaughter and dairy stock, or their products, milk, eggs, or meat, that are treated with antibiotics do not meet the terms of the arrangement. So it's for cheese and milk powder and meat, and it's for ingredients in processed organic products, even minor ingredients, if they are from organic livestock that are certified under the EU system and they've been treated with antibiotics or not verified to not have been treated with antibiotics, they would not meet the terms of the arrangement. However, animals that are produced in the EU without the use of antibiotics may be traded under the arrangement. That would have to be verified by the certifier and be part of that verification through the import certificate. So EU import certificates, this is, again, already a requirement for getting organic products into the EU. What changes here is that all U.S. certification bodies that are accredited by the National Organic Program, as of June 1st, they issue these EU import certificates. In the past, it was only U.S. certifiers that went through the additional step of getting ISO Guide 65 accreditation and getting their accreditation under some kind of EU system. In order to issue those import certificates, the U.S. certifiers must verify that the products that are in that shipment comply with the terms of the arrangement. So many U.S. certifiers already know this process. It's a type of transaction certificate, so it verifies that that particular transaction, that particular shipment of organic product going into the EU meet the terms of the arrangement. On the U.S. side, we're going to be implementing a similar system. We didn't particularly like this part of the agreement. We were trying to get import certificates taken off the table and not part of the arrangement, but they could not have the requirement for import certificates, so we're putting import certificates in place for products coming into the U.S. so that it's a fair system, that what's required to get products into the EU is the same as what's required to get products into the U.S. So what will happen is that any EU authorized certifier may issue these NOP import certificates for organic products that are imported into the U.S., and then on the EU side, those certifiers are going to have to verify that any products within that particular shipment comply with the terms of the arrangement. The scope of the arrangement, what's included. It's everything any product that's produced or where final processing or packaging occurs within the U.S. or the EU member states are included under the terms of the arrangement. So this is a little different than the Canadian agreement. The Canadian agreement is a global agreement. This agreement is somewhat broad, but is not as broad as the Canadian agreement. It only includes final packaging of products, final products that are packaged or processed within the U.S. or EU member states. But as long as that final processing or packaging occurs in the U.S., organic ingredients may come from domestic or foreign sources. So a processor in the U.S. could be sourcing ingredients from Costa Rica, Argentina, China, Australia, and those ingredients, if they're certified by an NOP authorized certifier, which includes directly accredited certifiers and certifiers that are accredited through recognition agreements, all those types of organic products can be utilized as ingredients in a final product that's packaged or processed within the U.S. and then shipped under the terms of the arrangement. So it is fairly broad in terms of what's included, but it does not include direct trade between those third countries, Argentina, Ghana, and the EU if it's certified under the NOP system, or from South Africa to the U.S. if it was certified under the EU system. I think I said that right. So the other thing to think about here is that this is one trade arrangement with the EU, but there are 27 countries involved. There's 27 countries in the European Union, so it's a huge market. It's the second biggest organic market in the world. Together, the two organic markets are like $50 billion, and there's a lot of growth potential in both markets. So really opens up a lot of opportunities. So what's excluded from the scope of the arrangement? Products shipped from countries outside of the United States or EU member states are not included. So direct shipment from Brazil to the EU would not be included, or direct shipment from Brazil to the U.S. would not be included. It's only for trade or products, final products from the EU to the U.S. or from the U.S. to the EU. Wine. Currently, under the EU Commission rules, well, they're in the process of publishing organic wine regulations. Wine is included in the arrangement. It's not excluded. But it's not completely included because their regulations are just going into effect. We'll be meeting with the Commission later this spring to work out the details on wine and some other issues. But in terms of wine, one of the terms of the arrangement is that you have to meet the labeling requirements of the importing country. And U.S. organic labeling requires that organic wines have no added sulfites, and that if sulfites are used, that they have to be less than 100 parts per million, and then the wine can be labeled as made with organic grapes. So wine is included in the arrangement, but European wine producers will need to meet the U.S. organic labeling requirements in order to ship their products into the U.S., which means that if they add sulfites, they can't label it as organic wine. If they add sulfites and it's less than 100 parts per million, they could label it as made with organic wine and sell it within the U.S. But on the other side of that, U.S. Wine producers that use organic grapes and add sulfites and sell their product as made with organic in the U.S. market will be able to have a label for the EU market that labels the product as an organic wine if it meets the EU organic labeling requirements for sulfites. Use of logos. Products may be labeled with the U.S. and or the EU organic logo, so either logo may be used. It's not required. But if you're shipping into the EU market, you will be able to use the EU logo, and you may use the USDA logo if you choose. Then vice versa, for products that are shipped from Europe under the terms of the arrangement, they may use the USDA organic logo, the EU logo, or both. So logos are available to be used under the terms of the arrangement. And then what about certifiers that are operating in third countries? Really, there's no change. There's no change to the current process for accessing the U.S. or European market. So for those certifiers that are operating outside of the U.S. or the EU, they'll need to maintain accreditation under both systems. We're hoping that this arrangement is part of a trend, and we'll be able to expand the scope of this in the future if we have adequate oversight and adequate systems in these third countries. But currently, certifiers in third countries do need to maintain their accreditation under both systems if their producers and handlers want to access both markets. The other unique thing about the arrangement is that we have a whole part in this about technical cooperation. So we have an organic working group that will continue this EU-U.S. partnership. We'll be continuing to do assessments of each other's organic regulatory systems. We're looking at ways to do joint assessments in third countries to try to decrease the cost and share information about the assessments that are conducted, so we can also decrease the cost of doing these assessments in third countries. We'll be exchanging information on organic production strategies, on animal welfare, alternatives to antibiotics, and mitigating GMO contamination. In particular, the EU is very interested in strategies that U.S. producers are using to not utilize antibiotics in organic livestock production. Any information we can share with them can help them out. And then we're looking at information, for instance, on how they have organic poultry without methionine. So we're hoping to gain a lot of information and share a lot of information as we move forward with this arrangement. So we'll also be reviewing the arrangement and work towards eliminating these import certificates in the future because we understand that they are an additional burden. It does help to protect organic integrity in terms of verifying a particular shipment, but not sure if it's really necessary as we move forward and through the system. So the outcomes of this, increased trust in U.S. agriculture as a whole, organic agriculture in particular. It expands the scope of the USDA organic brand in terms of USDA organic logo will be seen in European markets. It paves the way for additional arrangements that minimize the carve-outs or critical variances. I mean, the beauty of this particular arrangement, it only has really the one carve-out for the antibiotics on both sides. So there's a lot of different areas you could think of putting in additional critical variances, but they're not there because we've determined that the systems are equivalent. And it greatly expands the number of U.S. producers and handlers that have access to the EU market. Also, U.S. certifiers no longer need EU accreditation. It will save them a lot of money for those additional audits, and EU certifiers will no longer need NOP accreditation. Recognition agreements with the United Kingdom and Denmark are no longer necessary. It eliminates duplicative certification fees, accreditation fees, and paperwork. It also eliminates import authorizations that were required for gaining access to the EU organic market. So previously, or up until June 1st, you don't just need the import certificate to access the EU market. You also need to get an import authorization for each farm or handler that's shipping product into the EU. So additional resources, we have a lot of information on the NOP website under NOP Trade European Union. There's a questions and answers sheet. There's a fact sheet on how to access the EU market. We'll have more information about import certificates coming soon. A copy of the EU regulations is available. We have copies of the letters and the regulations that established the equivalency arrangement, and then there's a trade report that the Foreign Ag Service just published last week that gives some specific information about market opportunities in the EU. So that's, I believe, the presentation, and now we're going to try to go through the questions. If you have any particular questions, please write them down, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. Go ahead.
Okay, so starting with the question, does this arrangement cover textiles and animal fiber such as wool?
Well, aquaculture is excluded from the arrangement, specifically excluded from the arrangement. Under the EU organic standards, they do have organic aquaculture standards. There are some European organic seafood that is sold and labeled within the U.S., but we specifically did not include organic aquaculture in the arrangement because the U.S. does not have organic aquaculture standards, and we're in the process of looking at developing those organic aquaculture standards. So that's the only thing that's not included. So everything else is not excluded, so you could say that it's included, but it's only included if the respective program has a regulation around those particular areas. So for textiles, the U.S. does not have organic textile standards, and I don't believe the EU has organic textile standards either. So fiber would be included because under both standards, fiber can be certified organic under the EU system or the USDA organic regulations. Fiber is included, but textiles are not because there's no specific regulations under either standard for that.
Okay, here's another scope question. Does this agreement apply to organic inputs, such as biopesticides certified for use in organic production?
Okay. Well, under the U.S. system, we don't certify biopesticides. They're allowed to be used in organic production if they meet the requirements, and the EU has a similar system. So inputs are not included in either system. Inputs are allowed under each system, but inputs aren't certified under either system. Okay, so Laura had a clarification of what that question really meant. Is if there's a material that's allowed under the EU organic standards, could it be used in the U.S.? Absolutely not, and vice versa. If there's a material allowed under the USDA organic standards on the national list, for instance, could it be used under the EU system? No, that's not what this is about. We've determined that these are equivalent systems, so you have to be certified under your respective country's requirements. If you meet those respective countries' requirements, including the allowed materials that can be used, then you meet the terms of the arrangement and you can ship products into respective countries.
Okay, here's a common question. Is Switzerland included in this arrangement?
No, Switzerland's not part of the EU member states. They have a special relationship with the EU member states, but it's not included as one of the EU member states, so it's not included.
Okay, clarification. Are NOP products certified under a recognition agreement also included within the scope?
Yeah, the organic ingredients that are certified under a recognition agreement, for instance, products that are certified in New Zealand under the New Zealand recognition agreement by a certifier in New Zealand, if those products are shipped into the U.S. for repackaging or use as an ingredient and then shipped to the EU, that would be included. But you couldn't ship products directly from New Zealand to the European Union under the terms of the arrangement.
Okay. Is any USDA accredited certifier allowed to certify to this arrangement, or will there be a list of approved U.S.-based certifiers?
There is a list of U.S.-based certifiers that are part of the EU regulation that they published last week, and this includes all NOP-accredited certifiers that operate within the U.S. So there's a list of, I think, about 59 certifiers, so it includes all U.S. domestic certifiers, and it also includes some foreign certifiers that actually operate within the U.S. So it's more than just the domestic certifiers. It's all certifiers that actually certify operations within the U.S. This is something that will probably need to be updated over time as either new certifiers come online or are accredited, or certifiers drop their accreditation in the U.S.
Here's an easy one. What is the acronym CFR?
The Code of Federal Regulations.
I have one here for you, Miles. For products exported to the EU, how will the difference between the EU 1-year waiting period versus the 3-year transition time in the U.S. be addressed?
Products that are
the difference in the transition time between the EU and the U.S. for products to be certified for crops, how will that be addressed in the agreement?
Well, the products need to meet the requirements of the respective regulation. So a product that's certified in the EU needs to meet the EU requirements for transition, which for crops needs to meet the requirements for, 2 years before planting for annual crops, and then 3 years before harvest for perennial crops. So it's a similar standard, but not identical, and we've determined that that standard is equivalent.
Okay, kind of a similar question on transition. Does the use of antibiotics on tree fruit restrict the crop for the current growing year, or is there a 36-month transition required before fruit from the trees can be exported?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and there's going to be questions like this that we're going to have to get back to people on. We have, as I said, we have a meeting with the EU Commission later this spring, and that's one of the questions that we need to address. How far back do you go for the antibiotic use in organic tree fruit? Is it just for that growing season, or is it for the whole transitional time? So we'll get back to you on clarification on that particular question.
Okay. Will compliance with the requirements for this arrangement be self-declared, or will verification be required from certification bodies?
The verification is required from certification bodies with the import certificates. So for product coming in from the EU, it's going to be the EU authorized certifiers that will have to verify that that particular shipment is in compliance with the terms of the arrangement. And for products coming from the U.S. and going into Europe, it's the U.S. certifiers that need to issue those import certificates and verify that the terms of the arrangement are met.
Will use of import certificates be expanded to other equivalency arrangements, i.e. Canada?
We have no plans to do that at this time. The Canadian agreement is working very well. Attestations are working fairly well. We have continual conversations with our Canadian colleagues on the continued implementation of that equivalency arrangement. As we stated, we have worked to eliminate the critical variance on the stocking rates for ruminant animals. We're continuing to work with the Canadians on other ways to potentially eliminate some of the other critical variances under that arrangement. We're looking at ways of doing joint assessments with Canada as well, potentially in third countries. So we'll continue to work with Canadians to make sure that that arrangement is implemented, continues to be implemented smoothly.
Can an operator based in the U.S. be certified only to the EU regulation and then sell in the U.S. under the NOP?
So an operation in the U.S. be certified only to the EU, and then no, that won't work. Interesting idea, but no, we're not going to support that.
This question is, will a template be available to confirm that no antibiotics have been used for EU products?
Yeah, we'll be providing instructions and an import certificate, so you'll have to use the USDA-approved import certificate. Wait a minute. This is for products going into the EU. So it will be an EU certificate, import certificate. They already have these import certificates that are approved. If you go to our website and you go to how to access the EU organic market, it'll take you to a link on the EU Commission to the details on how to complete those import certificates. And there'll be a change because for U.S. certifiers in the past, they've had to check one box, and under the equivalency arrangement, they check a different box. And so it'll be the responsibility of the certifier to understand those instructions and make sure that you're completing those import certificates appropriately for products being shipped to the EU.
How about vice versa? How about for EU products coming to the United States?
For EU products coming to the United States, we'll be issuing instructions on that. There will be an import certificate. It will be, if you're familiar with the TM11s that are utilized for export certificates that are for organic products going to Taiwan or Japan, it'll be similar in format to that, and so that will be available with instructions for the European certifiers, the European authorized certifiers that can utilize those import certificates for products that are going to be shipped into the U.S.
Okay, how much processing needs to be done to consider it to be final processing to be shipped to the other partner?
How much processing? We don't define how much processing. We say that it's where the final processing, packaging, labeling occurs in the respective markets. That's what's included in the arrangement. So that would include, for instance, relabeling or repackaging. So it's minimal as long as it's certified and handled within the respective markets. It's included under the terms of the arrangement. What it does not include is for products being shipped from those third countries directly to the other market. So a marketer or trader could not, would have to have the product come through the respective country, like come into the United States and be relabeled or repackaged in order to be included in the arrangement. They couldn't just say that, well, we're a U.S.-based trader and we're certified here and ship their product directly from, for instance, Costa Rica to the EU.
If product from the EU is brought into the U.S. prior to June 1 and then sold after the June date, will the product be acceptable to the NOP?
Yeah, the arrangement goes into effect on June 1st, but it doesn't only include products that are produced or processed after June 1st. It means that the arrangement is effective and we have a broad acceptance of each other's programs. We've determined that they're equivalent, so that would include products that were certified previously to June 1st, as well as after June 1st. So there's no particular time frame on that. It includes all products, whether they were harvested before June 1st or after June 1st.
Okay, how about products labeled 100% organic under the NOP and sold in Europe? How will those be treated?
That's why there's the requirement that you have to meet the respective markets' labeling requirements. So under the EU organic labeling requirements, there is no 100% organic category. They only have one category. That's the organic category. It has to include at least 95% organic ingredients, so it's similar to the organic category in the U.S. If it's less than 95% organic ingredients, then it can't be labeled as organic. You can make a claim, I believe, in the ingredients list, and you can make a percentage claim, but they have no made with organic category. So that's, again, an area that we're going to look at providing more clarification after we meet with the EU Commission this spring. But the basic idea there is that you have to, if you're shipping into the EU, you want to understand the EU labeling requirements, and you're going to need to meet those EU labeling requirements for shipping products into the EU.
Okay, another question is about grains, and that they didn't hear much about grains, and wonder if you have anything further to add about grain trade.
Well, I think that it could potentially open up markets for U.S. organic grains into the European market, because there's certainly a number of U.S. organic grain producers that are not currently certified to both the U.S. and the European standards. So it opens up market opportunities for U.S. operations, and there's certainly a demand in Europe for organic grain. So I think it will open up a lot of market opportunities for U.S. producers. Yeah, the other thing to clarify is that the EU used to not require 100% organic feed in livestock production. That has been a requirement for all organic livestock as of December of 2011. So that is part of the reason why it made it easier for us to reach this agreement. We looked very closely at their feed requirements, and that was one of our concerns, that they had allowed non-organic feed as a certain percentage under their organic livestock standards, but that's no longer the case. The EU regulations require 100% organic feed, just like in the U.S.
Two more questions, maybe. Here we go. If we have our annual organic inspection before June 1st, will we still need to be audited for EU standards?
If you have your
annual inspection before June 1st by a certifier, will you need to be audited to the EU standards?
So you're a U.S. producer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're a U.S. producer. Well, after June 1st, you don't need to be certified to the EU standard if you're shipping into Europe. So there's no need for an additional certification or additional inspection. You just need to maintain your NOP certification, and you're good to go to access both the U.S., Canadian, and European market.
So I think the question too was, if your inspection happens in May, and you normally pay for that EU extra certification, you wouldn't need to do that this year.
You'll need to work with your certifier. And your certifier will give you the right information. But after June 1st, there's going to be no need for U.S. certifiers to provide EU organic certification. So U.S. certifiers are going to have to change their process and get this information out to their clients on these changing requirements, and that's going to take a little bit of time for them to understand what these new requirements are and get that information out to the organic trade here in the U.S. so that this can be implemented smoothly. That's why we have a few months to go before this is effective. But the basic idea is that there's no longer the need for two certifications. So for 2012, you should not need to incur the additional cost for EU certification or EU inspections. Okay, we've gotten many questions here. We're going to review all those questions, and we'll be providing additional clarification and answers to these questions on the NOP website over the next couple of weeks. As you can see, there are some questions that we still need to work out, but we're committed to looking at all the questions and trying to answer those questions in the most reasonable way possible. This trade is always good at coming up with very good questions and some very difficult ones, but we'll be reviewing those and getting back to you all through the NOP website. I think we're going to do further outreach on this at the OTA Policy Conference at the end of April, and we're looking at doing a training for certifiers in conjunction with the NOSB meeting in May. So we'll be providing additional information as we move this forward. And please, if you have any particular questions, send those into the program so that we can address those and have a smooth implementation of this new arrangement. So thank you very much for your time today, and go out there and find some new markets.